Today's video is brought to you by my Patreon. This video was a Patreon exclusive that was recorded months ago. So if you like exclusives like this and you want to support my channel, you can hit me up at patreon.com/tnoir. As if Hollywood has not inundated us with enough pink nipples. The forces of The Weeknd, Sam Levinson, and HBO have joined to bring us yet another highly controversial, sexually aggressive think piece magnet, and this one is called The Idol. The Idol tells the story of tortured artist Jocelyn, played by Lily Rose Depp, fighting to get her career back in the public's approval. Jocelyn fell from grace after her abusive mother died of cancer, which led to a psychotic break, and in the quest to revive herself, she meets Tedros, played by The Weeknd, aka Abel Tesfaye. Tedros is a nightclub owner slash wannabe producer slash cult leader slash stinky boy. Stinky boy. And Tedros sells Jocelyn the dream of reviving her career through uncharted rawness and sexual exposure, which ultimately leads to her dramatically, yet consensually, sexually exerting herself. I don't have much to add regarding the actual plot because it was boring. It was a truly unimpressive show. Sex has always been something that Western media has tried to find new and more rebellious ways to depict. So at this rate in 2023, am I surprised that we saw what we saw in this show? No. Am I disappointed in its packaging? Yes. But Sam Levinson and The Weeknd, they already getting jumped. What interested me more was the placement of Jocelyn's sexuality in her overall character makeup. And as I was looking deeper into it, I noticed some similarities in Cassie's sexuality in Euphoria. And then I noticed some more similarities in Marilyn of Blonde. And then Anastasia of 50 Shades. And I said, well, hold on. This is a pattern. So it landed me on this particular theory, which is in sexual scenarios, one thing that is constantly centered, whether by the creators or by the audience, is the assumed sexual virtue of white women. Their assumed purity, morality, and innocence. And it's almost like the story is written to dress around that. And it's not always super obvious, right? Like take Jocelyn, for example, she's not exactly giving pure and innocent. But the intentional positioning of this petite, sexually misguided white woman and her pink nipples opposite a sadistic male aggressor, a black male aggressor at that. The discomfort that brings up in viewers, it relies on a protected and reinforced idea of what white women's sexuality is supposed to be and look like. So hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name is T if you're new here, and today I'm about to be in white people's business. Specifically, the journey of white women's sexuality as portrayed in modern media and how that directly affects our perception of the sexualities of other races. This portion of today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a virtual private network that keeps your internet activity safe and private. When your device connects to the internet while using Surfshark, your information is encrypted, meaning if anyone is trying to be nosy in your internet activity, they won't know what you're doing or where you're doing it from. Speaking of location, Surfshark also allows you to change your IP address, quite literally allowing you to virtually travel the world. For me, this is so helpful because not only is it important to me to make sure that my browsing history is not being surveilled, but as an avid media consumer for both work and pleasure, I want access to it all without any restrictions based on my physical location. So many of us use the internet daily, and we should all rest assured knowing that our internet activity is our business and nobody else's. If you're ready to give Surfshark VPN a try, there is an exclusive holiday season deal happening now. Visit surfshark.deals/tnoir and enter promo code TNOIR, TEENOIR, for up to 6 months of Surfshark for free. And of course, thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Now, if you thought HBO only recently started being super explicit with the nudity and the drug use and the power play, I'm here to tell you that they've been bad. Before there was The Idol, before there was Euphoria, there was this cute little vampire show that came out in 2008 called True Blood. If there's anything True Blood lives in infamy for, is that on that show, they was f***ing. Especially the one female protagonist, Miss Sookie Stackhouse. The amount of lovers that Sookie rotated throughout the course of that show, I mean, I love that for her. You know I do. But lest we forget that in the very first episode, she was introduced to us as a 26-year-old virgin. And she was a virgin because she could hear humans' thoughts, so having sex with men was not something that she could ever bring herself to do.
It for y'all?
Yes, if you could serve them nachos off them perfect titties, we'd all be mighty obliged. Ain't nothing I like more than licking food off a girl.
But that all changed when she met Vampire Bill. And then it changed some more when she met Vampire Eric, which I have to say, that was one of the best love stories in True Blood. I know that it caused a bit of commotion, but I truly did not see it coming. And then by the time it got to me, I didn't want it to end. I thought that was really good. But anyway, it changed some more when she met Werewolf Alcide, and then Lil Mo when she met Fairy Ben. Sex was already positioned in this show as something that was so animalistic, especially since it was an activity that involved supernatural beings. It was constantly reiterated that when Sookie was involved in these encounters, she was involved in savage-like behavior, because these were beings that deceived, beings that tortured, that killed. But I mean, what else could we expect? It was just in their nature. But when it came to Sookie specifically, these savages were people who came in and protected her. They fought for her, and ultimately they could not resist her because her blood was just so tantalizing, so pure. And if we're gonna get metaphorical, which we are, what True Blood was really doing was reiterating the undisciplined sexual appetite of a stronger oppressive force and reinforcing the virtue of their vision of an idealized figure. And what made her ideal was the stronger force's belief in her innocence, her weakness, her naivete, and her purity. And True Blood somehow found a way to make these two opposing forces intersect, and it seemed natural. Like, they packed the story so tight that it really didn't leave much room for the viewers to question anything, like how or why these forces could even be seen as compatible to begin with, or why they even were meant to be perceived like that individually in the first place. We were just meant to accept it as a fixed truth. But how did True Blood maintain, or at least try to maintain, Sookie's supposed honor for so long, given the force and velocity with which she was popping that pussy? They did so by separating her sexual behavior from her. Sexuality was something that Sookie kind of tripped and fell in. Something that naturally she had no inclination to, but supernaturally, after being met with forces stronger than hers, she basically just went with the flow, and whatever pleasure she happened to stumble upon that she was not looking for, that was just merely a byproduct of her circumstances. I love to have conversations about sexualization in media. I mean, I already have like 5 videos on it, and I don't think I'll ever run out of things to talk about. But I noticed that these conversations are largely initiated by and center the bodies of women of color, especially Black women. And when we have these conversations, we're able to do so at length, and there's a plethora of resources out there to assist us with that. And that's because we have something to compare it to: white women's sexuality, because white women's sexuality is seen as generic sexuality. But when I tried to flip it and explore how white women's sexuality has journeyed through the media, I kept hitting a wall. The resources were so slim. It was incredibly difficult to attempt an analysis on something that is considered the standard, the baseline, like the starting point. When women of color are overtly sexual, take for example the current state of female rap, we're really seen as just relishing in our pre-existing deviance. In my Perfect Pussy Complex video, I spoke about how Black women rappers specifically oscillate through this vulgar virgin pendulum because it allows them the grace to cause men just enough discomfort so that they feel empowered as women, while still aligning close enough with male values so that they don't die without a husband. Well, I mean, somebody had to say it. And while I still stand by that mostly, I want to remix it a little bit, make it a little less reductive, and say maybe it's not solely to find a husband, but even if just for personal gratification, to maintain a sense of Morality. There's no good word for this, you know? But either way, imagine how tiring that is. The performance of it all, you know, the hyper vigilance that goes into maintaining that dichotomy, and oftentimes the efforts are still in vain. Even though through these personas, Black women are in some way challenging notions of purity, we are seldom credited for deconstructing it because the idea of purity never included us to begin with. But as white women are assumed to be born with this virtue, and this ideology can date back to fundamentalist Christian teachings in slavery, they are both the ideal and they can be the disruptors. When white women go against purity culture, though they may be critiqued with, you know, classic typical misogyny, they are still pretty widely celebrated for it. But even if they're not, and this is the kicker, they can always return to the comfort of modesty without or with very little resistance from other white people. Take, for example, Miley Cyrus's light skin era. You know I had to double it. You didn't think I was just gonna take down my cultural appropriation video and never bring it up ever again, did you? No, but seriously, you know what's wild? Every time I bring up the Mylisha era, I should call it, the girls are triggered. But now she's in her rock star era. You know, it's giving very Stevie Nicks realness, very Janis Joplin tease. The white woman is white womaning. She is. And the most sexuality we see from her these days is maybe a little leg on the album cover. Maybe a little nipple through the satin dress. I don't know. But I love this for her. This works for Miley, right? And the music, it go. That shit go. But again, we not gonna forget the Mylisha, and the same thing goes for Kim K. Goodbye box braids, hello blonde bust down. Oh my goodness, appealing to the ideal of white femininity is working like a charm for shorty. And in a way, they are shedding, just naturally shedding that super sexed up image just by becoming white again. White women are allowed the flexibility to be the face of purity and promiscuity without their assumed virtue being tainted. Women of color, we don't get the privilege to revert because, again, that just was never our starting point to begin with. Purity is not our home in their eyes, okay? And that's because of a key difference. White women's... There is actual value placed on white women's morality. So in fictional portrayals, care is extended to this back and forth type, like seesaw type dynamic, but it's still a tool of misogyny because it still centers the very often male creator / male gaze and not the female subject. I think of so many of the tropes that have been in rotation for decades now, just to name a few. The cool girl who embodies all of the things that a traditionally masculine man bonds with other men over. The only thing that doesn't make her one of the bros is her sex appeal, which is effortless and goes mostly unacknowledged by the woman herself. She seems to not even be the slightest bit aware that she's Megan fucking Fox. Then of course we have the girl next door, the humble nice girl who the male protagonist has always known but never really paid attention to. Her humility and disinterest in sexual attention is eventually what makes her the perfect love interest and sexual partner. Or what about the classic blonde bombshell, who, in the words of the take, is, quote, a woman with pure, primal sex appeal, uncomplicated by many thoughts. I am simply here to ask, what in the fresh hell is this? Again, it positions this woman's sexuality as something that needs a chaperone. Something that she stumbles upon once the male interest is ready to engage with her sexually, and or something happens in the world, like, you know, the circumstances of her world, not something that is naturally born from her own desires. And if I'm gonna make a connection in this theory, this might have something to do with the death of teenagehood. Okay, so a year or two ago, the commentary girls were on this topic pretty heavily, and rightly so. Shout out to Shania, shout out Madison Brown. Yeah, the way young white teenage girls especially are prepped and primed for a nearly 2-decade run of sexual dependence in the media. So through the media, for better or worse, girlhood is clearly defined. You, like, from the fashion to the toys, like all of that, you can't really mistake it for anything else. And the same is true for womanhood. You know, historically at least, the media has made it clear what they want womanhood to look like. But when it comes to teenagehood, the lines are so blurred. And even from a commercial standpoint, like you can just tell with the way things are marketed these days, there is not really any space preserved for pubescence, you know, where girls can just stand still at a time that such extreme change is happening to their minds and bodies. It's like once you start growing titties and getting some bumps on your face, it is automatically time for you to put aside childish things and find your place in this world as a woman. And that's really just coded for find your place as a sexual being in this world, because sexuality isn't something that you like choose and then explore as a woman. Sexuality chooses you because you are a woman. And I think it would be silly of me to not even at least attempt to make the connection that the lack of knowledge and maturity of a teenage girl, like during that time, it leaves a window open for men to come in and say, oh, you know, you're supposed to be sexy right now, but you don't know how to do that because you're fucking 16? Well, let me show you. Let me help you out. Let me write this part of the story for you. And I'm focusing this part on white women because though women of color are sexualized too, it starts way before that, and it starts for different reasons and with different intentions. So for that reason, I'm making the distinction, but it's not an absolute. But man, it makes me sad. It makes me angry. Because white women's sexuality, it never even got the chance to be their own. None of us, but you know what I mean? Like, before they could even come to terms with it themselves, here came the male vision, here came the male gaze, and then that carries on for like, what, 20, 30 years, and then you get to like cougar age, and then that shit is a joke too. That shit, the cougar trope, it's written in jest. And it's always written for us to laugh at the idea of older women having desires. Like, damn, she finally gets the chance to embody sexuality on her own terms, and we're meant to laugh at her for it. So separating young white women's sexuality from them as a means to reinforce their virtue. So at some point, you gotta push the needle forward. You gotta make the girls a little bit more raunchier, a little bit more scandalous, because again, that's just where we are in sex culture. Just because characters like Jocelyn and Cassie are consenting to what they're doing and their sexual behavior might not be as passive as the aforementioned tropes, that does not automatically reflect a healthy, autonomous relationship with it. Jocelyn's enjoyment of BDSM and Cassie's inclination to promiscuity, they're both written as outcomes of a dark past. And we ate that up, right? Oh my gosh. Let me just speak for myself. No. I thought Cassie was so complex. The slew of events out of Cassie's control that were explained in depth, from a little bit of her childhood, how things changed for her when she hit puberty, her dad's Dr. Ugg problem, him abandoning her and her sister, all that, her mom being okay, all right, so we were close. We were close to seeing her dark past manifest into just a person. Just a person, and maybe we could draw the connections to see how that influenced the greater picture of what she was doing. This girl was fucking her best friend's ex-boyfriend, and there is so much more to that than just the fucking. What you gotta do up here to deem that as okay? We were this close. But instead, it's like the dark past was thrown in there to help the viewer make more sense of this doe-eyed, bewildered looking white girl and her sexual choices, her controversial sexual choices. That's what the backstory was for. That's what the abandonment story was for. Because she was fucking. It wasn't for nothing else. Because We gotta go. So then in The Idol, right? The amount of trauma tales that were pit stopped as Tedros and Jocelyn grew more and more, let's say, sexually outrageous. Even with that weak ass plot twist that Jocelyn was the master manipulator all along. How did we get here? You know, maybe I would know if I knew more about her as a person, but I didn't. We kept bringing up this abusive mommy, right? This mean mommy. Jocelyn's mean mommy. We heard so much about her, yet so little at the same time. Did this terrible mommy have anything to do with who Jocelyn was as a person? We wouldn't know because it was brought up, but it wasn't really expanded on. It was just the precursor to some kinky shit. Like, come on. If y'all gonna make the gal kinky, make her kinky. If you're gonna make her tortured, make her tortured. But don't justify her kinks with her dark past, and don't dress up the delivery of her past with kinks. There has got to be a way to tell the story of a young woman with a troubled past that does not launch her into sexual activity that will then be the most enticing part of her character makeup. I know the men behind these shows, they thought they ate that. They thought that including elements of drugs and sex and suffering was really going to shake the table and provide something different to the culture, something that we were really missing. But all they really did was get information. They banked on the shock value of people witnessing petite white bodies with features of idealized femininity in positions that deny chastity. Truly, like they used that vision, that old tired vision of eroticism, that old tired sick twisted vision of eroticism to fluff up what would otherwise be pretty bleakly written characters. You think about the bombshell, you think about the cool girl, Cassie, Jocelyn, Anastasia from 50 Shades, Marilyn from Blonde, etc., etc. Her personhood was all but diminished, and these men thought they ate. And I hate them for that. Just strongly dislike them for that. Strongly dislike the vision. I don't know them as people. Okay, so when characters are created with these invisible standards, invisible standard. This is such a tool of white supremacy. Are we here? You know, it's like Bell Hooks said, we have to constantly critique white supremacist patriarchal culture because it is normalized by mass media and rendered unproblematic. You gotta go looking for the problem. So as I've just discussed, the sex appeal of white women in media lies in their assumed virtue. Yuck. Patriarchy, you're done. What did Kiki Palmer say? Misogyny, you're done. You're done. Seriously. And let me add one more can. That the sex appeal of women of color in media lies in our assumed deviance. Okay, so the sexual appetites of these male creators that they don't even have the guts to be forward about. Like, they're not even upfront about it. It's all, they gotta duck and bob and weave and tuck. Those sexual appetites don't go away. They are just offloaded onto characters of color. In her book, White Women, Brown Tears, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Color, Ruby Hamad writes, quote, "White society marked the bodies of women of color as a receptacle for its sins, so that it may claim innocence for itself, and, as the chosen symbol of the innocent perfection of whiteness, the white damsel with her tears of distress functions as both denial of and absolution for this violence." I love that, a receptacle for its sins. So, if my theories are correct, and virtue, innocence, and all of that is the baseline representation of white women's sexuality in the media, what then? And I gotta shout out Final Girl Studios. I forgot the name of the channel, but I gotta shout them out because this question was posed and it really stuck to me. So if they gotta do all that to show white women, what then does black women's representation have to be for us to be seen? So we already know the answer to that. And thankfully, there are forces at work combating that. It does suck that we had to wait on the great saint of Issa Rae to finally see successful and iconic depictions of Black women's eroticism without it seeming exploitative or like it relies on deviance. But if we're meant to be a genuinely critical culture, like our critiques are genuine and we're doing it for sake of trying to make a more honest media landscape, this is the type of shit that we have to call out. And then when we have media avalanches like The Idol, it's important that we question it from all angles. And that's why I'm choosing this one and not the one that everyone else was doing. Cause for sure, you're right on. Everyone who's talking about the gratuitous sexual content and female suffering as a spectacle, for sure, you're right on. We are right here with it. I completely agree. I just wanted to talk about, I wanted to come in from another angle. All right, so The Idol, I guess we can talk about the show a little bit since y'all are here. I do think that there is still beauty left in the archetype of the sexually hindered woman. Yes, I do. I do still think that there's beauty in the story of explorative sex or using sensuality or eroticism to spark inspiration and creativity. Yes. Because, I mean, think about it. The Idol could have been so good. You know, I was listening to Rocket the other day by Beyonce. I have a very personal relationship with that song. So personal that I have a few times contemplated writing a very long form analysis on what that song means to me, but I just never really got around to it. I think when I first heard that song, I was 17? Yeah, 17, because I was just about to leave high school, still a virgin, like all that stuff. Through that song, that was the first times that I heard it artistically expressed that sex is supposed to be experienced and it's not just supposed to be felt. It's not just supposed to happen to me. Yeah, I don't know if what I said here is going to be suitable for the YouTube monetization machine, but you know where the video's at if you want to watch it in full. And she acknowledged the moments where she was submissive. She acknowledged the moments she was dominant. And she's like, but you're my equivalent. Like, never forget that. She checks in with her confidence. She checks in with her vulnerability, her exposure, physically and mentally. I mean, out of nowhere, she's like, and another thing. Have you noticed that social media is kind of bullshit? We are so much better than this. We're so much more than pointless fixtures, Instagram pictures, consumers. What about that ching ching ching? What about that? Come on, post nut clarity. Like, she gave us that too. Anyway, so if Beyonce could communicate all of that in a 5 to 6 minute song, imagine what could have happened in a 5 to 6 episode series if it had the right to be shown. And yes, I know about the whole, like, they fired. So I've heard all about the whole Amy Seimetz thing and how a woman was involved in The Idol and then she was just scrapped from the project because it had too much of a female perspective. Because that's so bad, right? And now look, I've heard all about that. So maybe if that was there and we would have actually gotten to see an artist sensually evolve from, let's say, a Naughty Girl and Upgrade You-esque expression of sexuality to a Rocket, to a Virgo's Groove, you know what I'm saying? And we were able to also hear the harrowing tales of Hollywood and the music industry and the fame monster. I think that could have been an amazing, like an exceptional show, but Alu Kianir, all right, Alu Kianir will feel. They feeling it, I'm sure. But all right, we gotta wrap this up. it just has to be done correctly, these shows. And when it's done incorrectly, I think we need to critique it with the same integrity across the board, because high key, The Idol is getting what Euphoria should have got. Granted, Euphoria was a much more entertaining show, but they have parallels and similarities that we should be finding issue with. So you better believe that when that show comes back in 2025, 2026, if we are still in a think piece culture and I have thoughts, I just know that they will be much different from what they were before. Because there are things that I didn't see then that I'm definitely seeing now. And I mean, that's what happens when you let your controversial show just sit for so long. Then people start rewatching, triple, quadruple watching it, and before you know it, what do they say? You either die a hero or you whatever the fuck. Yeah. So thank you all for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the very end. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.